My name's Chris. I'm an airline pilot working here in Canada. And with my job, especially when I'm in uniform, I meet a bunch of different people from all over the world, from hotel lobbies to airport terminals, you name it. They always seem to have questions, and in particular, it seems these 5 questions seem to come up a lot. So today we're talking about the top 5 most asked questions that I get as an airline pilot working here in Canada. So probably the number 1 question that I get asked is, are you the pilot or are you the co-pilot? To which, ironically, the answer is both. Let me explain. So usually when people ask this question, what they're actually asking is, are you a first officer or are you a captain? It's important to know the distinction between a first officer, a captain, and a pilot and a co-pilot. So let me explain. When we're talking about captain and first officer, we're actually talking about ranks within the company structure. So the captain is the one with the final say and the highest amount of authority in the aircraft. He's the pilot in command, head honcho, everything falls on him if anything were to go wrong. As the first officer, you are the second in command. You are there to complement the captain, to offer advice, and to help assist with his direction and vision. But ultimately, if there is a disagreement between you two, the captain has the final say. So when it comes to pilot and co-pilot, those aren't ranks within the company structure, but rather those are roles that we play during the flight. And they change every single flight. So sometimes as a captain, he will be the pilot flying or the pilot, and sometimes he will be the pilot monitoring or the co-pilot. So these are distinctions of roles that we play in the flight deck. The pilot, or the pilot flying, is the one who'll be physically manipulating the controls during the takeoff, the climb out, the cruise, the descent, the approach, everything. He is the one physically controlling the aircraft and directing the autopilot or directing manual flight if he so chooses. The pilot monitoring, or the co-pilot, is the one who will be responsible for communicating with ATC, performing navigation, and also fuel checks, among any other task that the pilot flying asks him to do. So you can see why this question is oftentimes hard to answer, because when people ask this question, they're usually asking, are you the captain or are you the first officer? To which I always respond, I'm the first officer. But captain, first officer is a rank structure, and pilot and co-pilot, those are roles that we play throughout the flight. So the second most commonly asked question that I get asked is, how long does it take to become a pilot? And it's a really good question because that really does vary from person to person, but let's dive into that just a little bit. So it's an important distinction to make. Are you talking about just becoming a private pilot so that you can fly on your own leisure time, or are you talking about being a commercial pilot? Because there's very different quality of training in both. To become a private pilot, usually you can get that done within a few months of hard dedicated work, and that will roughly cost about $10,000 here in Canada. Now, of course, that varies from person to person and flight school to flight school, depending on your aptitude, depending on the program you're enrolled in, but in general, that's probably a good ballpark. So now, if you're talking commercial flight training, that's where things get really time-consuming and expensive. So on top of getting your initial private pilot's license, which we already discussed will take a few months and maybe 10,000 Canadian dollars, now you have to spend probably another 75,000 and the better part of a year or 2 to complete all of your training. Now, of course, there are special cases where you can go a little bit faster depending if you have the money available, and if you just devote yourself completely to flying, that's obviously a little bit different. But on a regular schedule, you're probably looking at, in total, 2 to 3 years to go from brand new pilot to a commercially licensed pilot to be able to work in Canada. Now, it's important to note as well that even though you do have a commercial license, you can't just jump straight into an airline. Most oftentimes, you'll still have to find a small job as an instructor or working for a smaller charter company until you have the hours and experience required to come into a major airline. Now, there are also exceptions to this. If you go to a university program that is accredited here in Canada, you are actually able to jump into an airline as long as that program is affiliated with the airline. So for example, if you went to Mount Royal, you do have the ability to jump straight into Jazz Aviation, which is Air Canada Express, or a Sunwing, or a plethora of other options, simply because you went to the accredited university, although that is a very competitive program. So question number 3, do pilots need perfect vision? And the answer is actually no, believe it or not. That's a very common misconception. Pilots do not need perfect vision to be able to fly an aircraft. However, you do have to be correctable up to 20/20 vision. So in my case, I do wear glasses. I have an astigmatism in the right eye, So for me, I can see normally on a regular day-to-day, but the glasses do just help bring me back up to that 20/20 vision. So when I'm flying, I do have to wear these glasses. And the other rule as well here in Canada is that you will have to have a spare set of glasses in your flight bag for just in case they break when you're flying. So there you have it. If you have a pair of glasses, you are more than able to become a pilot. Question number 4 on this list is, how do you get paid? And quite frankly, that is probably the most complicated question on this list, so let's dive into that. Pilots get paid in one of 4 different ways, and that changes every single day depending on the day that you have. So first of all, what we have is called a minimum monthly guarantee. This is one of the easiest concepts to understand. It's basically like you are on salary. At the end of the month, a pilot is guaranteed to make a certain amount of money, whether or not they were called in for work or not. So for example, if I was on reserve the entire month and I never got called in once, I would still be guaranteed that minimum monthly guarantee at the end of the month. So the second method that we get paid is actually a minimum daily guarantee. So when we report to work, no matter what happens, we are guaranteed to get a minimum of 4 credit hours, or a minimum of 4 hours worked. For example, if I was to report to work and suddenly the aircraft is inoperable and the flight gets canceled, I'm still going to go home getting paid 4 hours. I'm not going to be getting paid 0 money for having gone into work. Method number 3 is a little bit more complicated. So we are guaranteed the minimum 4 credit hours when we report to work. However, if I fly more than 4 hours in the aircraft, then I get paid whatever I made on top in terms of flight hours. So if I report to work, I get the minimum daily 4 hours, but if I flew 8 hours in that day, then I would be getting paid for 8 hours of work instead of the minimum 4. And finally, the 4th method that we get paid is actually half of the duty time. So the duty time is different than our flight time. Duty time is from when you report to work to when you leave work. So basically it's getting to the airport and leaving the airport. So the time spent in between those two is called your duty time. So if half of that duty time is more than the minimum daily guarantee and is more than the flight hours that you flew, then you'll be getting that duty time instead. So say for example, I was at work for 12 hours and I only flew 2 hours. I wouldn't be getting paid the 2 hours because that's below the minimum daily guarantee. I wouldn't be getting paid the 4 hours either because the minimum daily guarantee is less than half of the duty period, which is 6 hours. I hope that makes sense. Now on top of all that, you have premium pay, you have overtime pay, you have vacation pay, things like this. However, those are the 4 main ways that pilots are paid on a regular basis. The 5th and final question that I get asked all the time is, what does it mean to be on reserve and what do you do when you're on reserve? So basically being on reserve looks a little bit something like this. The company assigns you a shift. Usually they're about 12 hours long. In my case, right now I'm actually on reserve from 4 a.m. today until 4 p.m. tonight. During that period, I am completely on call, so if the company calls me, I have to A, answer the phone and be able to answer the phone, and B, I have to be able to be at the airport within 90 minutes of that phone call. That's just according to my contract. There are some contracts that are a little bit different in terms of time frame. Some people have more time to get to the airport, some people have less time to get to the airport. It varies from company to company. But essentially, you are on call so that if anything happens to an aircraft or to a crew, say delays or timeouts or weather, then we have to be able to get to the airport to help maintain the schedule and the operation. What you do with your time during that shift is completely up to you, as long as you can get to the airport within that 90 minutes. So you can film YouTube videos like me, you can go to the gym, you can do whatever hobbies you want, hang out with friends. The only thing that you can't do is obviously drink, because you don't know if you're going to work or not, and of course you cannot operate an aircraft under the influence of alcohol. So being able to bid reserve is actually a really cool part of the job. A lot of senior pilots do like bidding reserve so that they can spend more time at home with their family, helping to raise their kids, and they still get paid no matter what. So there you have it. Those are the top 5 most commonly asked questions that I get as an airline pilot working here in Canada. Hope you found the information useful, and if you did, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.